A wife like you with low income who only does part-time job is not qualified to be my wife. But your sister Julia, on the other hand, is amazing and radiant, unlike you. After all, she also earns $5,000 a month. She's also really beautiful, has a great body, and is gorgeous. There is a world of difference between you and your sister, since you're a woman with no charm at all. So, because of these reasons, it's not my fault that I cheated on you, Natalie. And it's all your fault that I'm acting this way. And that is the reason why I'm marrying your sister, okay? So, go ahead and sign the divorce papers.
Fine, I don't really care. But once we're done, and there comes a time where you regret about this whole thing, it'll be too late by then. Okay?
Huh? Oh, don't you worry. I won't regret it at all.
I think that I had a normal and ordinary, but happy married life with my husband, Dylan. But then, I guess it can all fall apart so easily like this, huh? I looked at my husband as he left the room while mocking me, and thought to myself, oh, how pathetic. But I wasn't thinking about how pathetic I was. It was about how pathetic my husband was. Because my husband would be the one who would lose everything from now on. My name is Natalie. I am married to my husband, Dylan, whom I met through a friend, and we are living an ordinary life together as a couple. Although we were still young and got married to each other, we didn't have any kids, and we were able to devote ourselves to each other's hobbies, friends, and other things that we liked. I like to do crafts and making little dolls. And Dylan, on the other hand, loves going out for drinks with his friends. So, supposedly, he and his friends get together once a month to catch up with each other. One day, when Dylan came home from drinking with his friends, he looked a little dissatisfied, which was pretty unusual. While preparing water to sober him up, I called out to Dylan. "Oh, welcome home, honey." "What's wrong? Why are you frowning, honey?"
Oh, well, I heard that a friend of mine is moving into a new place. And you know that big tower apartment in the neighborhood, which finished construction recently? Well, he's moving into that apartment.
Oh, wow! That's amazing. We can't imagine what that kind of world is like, living in a place like that for us. But it must be really nice. Just like Dylan has said, the construction of the magnificent tower apartment that had been under construction in our neighborhood for several years had finally been completed. I was looking at the construction site wondering what kind of rich people would be living there, but I was surprised that anyone close to us would be living there.
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine, isn't it?
Saying this, Dylan took the glass of water I gave him and chugged it in one go.
My friend's wife is supposedly self-employed and makes a lot of money, which is why they're rich. But compared to that, I'm the only one making any money, so it is definitely not possible for us.
Oh, honey, please don't say it like that. I work at the part-time job too.
But that's no different from a part-time job that even students are doing. I'm sorry, but it doesn't count as a proper work.
As my husband let out a huge sigh, he said that and pushed the empty glass towards me.
But compared to that, Natalie, your sister Julia is amazing, isn't she? When we had dinner with Julia the other night, she was wearing really expensive branded clothes and she's such a beauty, attracting everyone around her. And plus, she also told me that her monthly income is $5,000. Isn't that about 10 times more than what you earn with your petty job?
Dylan said this with a laugh, and disappeared into the bedroom as he walks dizzily since he was also drunk from the alcohol. I let out a small sigh as I watched him disappear. Dylan looks down on me on a regular basis, and I really hate it when he does that. Dylan works for a somewhat small local business, and from what I hear from Dylan, it's a very tough place to work because the pay doesn't increase that much. I understand that, but that doesn't mean that he should look down on me. And recently, Dylan has been praising about what my sister wears frequently. My elder sister, Julia, who is 3 years older than me, also lives nearby where we live. She's also the type of person who likes to go out for drinks, so I knew that she and Dylan often went out for drinks together. Julia has always been popular since we were young. Julia, who is always stylish and beautiful, is pampered and spoiled by everyone around her, and has a personality so different from mine that it is hard to believe that we are even sisters. Being with such a cheerful person like Julia, Dylan and her must get along really well. The two of them would frequently go out to pubs and bars to drink together. I never thought that Julia and I would be compared as sisters even after I got married to Dylan, and to think that my own husband was the one doing it. Today, too, I felt really uneasy about what Dylan had said while I went to sleep. The next day, Dylan, who had the day off, suddenly says something while we were eating breakfast together.
Hey, Natalie, why don't we move? To that big tower apartment.
You're talking about that big tower apartment again? That's an option only for the rich people, you know that, right? As my personal opinion, I think that for us, a small house is just perfect for each other. Plus, I don't think that we'd really feel at home if it's too big like that tower apartment.
Well, that may be true, but if we think about getting old, isn't it not a bad idea to live in a place with good security and moving into a place which is just really clean and nice?
But if we move into a tower apartment now, we won't be able to live the life that we're living right now before we get old. You know that, right? But hearing this, Dylan was still mumbling and complaining, as if he was still not convinced with what I was saying about the truth. I guess he must be very jealous of his friend's success. Dylan has a habit of showing off about who he is and what he has to others, and he wants to be envied by other people for having what he has. Of course, if we could, I would love to live in a nice place like that tower apartment. But even if Dylan and I doubled our income, we would still never be able to afford such a luxurious place.
Well, I knew it, that it would be difficult, because I have a wife who doesn't earn enough.
He says this and looks down on me as he ignores the fact that he himself earns low income. So, as usual, I ignore what Dylan says and drink my soup.
All right, yeah. I guess I'll have to work a little harder too.
Dylan muttered this to himself, his expression brightening a bit as he ate his breakfast. He must have thought of something or an idea, but it's not like you can move into that tower apartment right away. I thought so to myself and did not really ask him what he was thinking, but I was later confronted with a shocking fact. It must have been about a month after we had that breakfast together. On that day, Dylan did not let me know about his drinking session with his friends, which was unusual of him, and he came back home in the morning. Hearing a taxi stop near our place, I rushed to the front door. "Hey, Dylan! When you'd get home late, you would always call me in advance, so why didn't you? What's wrong? You had me really worried." When I opened the front door as I said that, I saw not only Dylan, but Julia with him. Both Dylan and Julia looked really drunk, and the sun was coming up, as it was really early in the morning. They must have been drinking together. judging from the way the smell of alcohol drifted through the air just by facing both Julia and Dylan. But no matter how much they both liked to drink, this was the first time they had ever continued drinking until morning. While I was being stunned at the situation, both Dylan and Julia pushed me out of the way and stormed into the house.
Natalie, I need to talk to you. Come over here.
I did as I was told, and I sat around the table as the two sat down before me. Both Dylan and Julia was too drunk that I thought it'd be just a huge hassle to go against them.
Okay, I'm going to just be straightforward with you. I am divorcing you.
What? Is that a joke? I asked with a laugh, but then Julia opened her mouth as she laughed at me contemptuously. Oh, I'm sorry, Natalie. Actually, it's something I've been thinking about for a while now. It seems like you and Dylan seem to live in completely different worlds. Dylan is much more suited to a woman like me. Julia said this as she hugged Dylan's arm right in front of me. To this, Dylan looked really happy. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing from early in the morning. I let out a huge sigh as I was feeling ridiculous about what was happening in front of my eyes. What is the meaning of all this, Dylan?
What do you mean by what is the meaning of this? All you've been doing is you've only been making pocket money and acting all high and mighty while calling that your job is proper work when it isn't, since it's only just a part-time job, and I just couldn't take it anymore.
Oh, I heard everything from Dylan, Natalie. When Dylan said he wanted to live in the tower apartment, you told him that it was impossible. You can't trust what your husband is worthy for, which shows that you're not a fit wife for him. The two of them were laughing happily as they said such things to me in a really drunk manner.
Unlike you, your sister had respected what I suggested. She said to me that I'll be a man who looks good and suits very well in that tower apartment. Like that, she agrees with what I say, and she is a nice woman compared to you.
I was just saying what the reality is, you know. Both you and Julia are just too drunk to make any good decisions. Just praising or complimenting each other that easily won't make any difference, will it? You have always had a poor mindset, and you are always so frugal, so it's no wonder that people around you will be poor too. Do you even know how much Dylan really earns? Julia says that as she glares at me. He earns about $7,000 per month. I couldn't help but laugh at what she said. How could I not know about Dylan's salary? He doesn't even make that much kind of money at all. When I looked at Dylan, he awkwardly turned his eyes away from me. I guess he must have lied to Julia as they were getting excited while they were talking to each other and getting drunk together. So, his usual habit of trying to look good to other people had kicked in, huh?
Anyway, Julia earns a lot more money than you, Natalie, and she also agrees with me and stands up for me. It's no doubt that she's a much better wife than you, Natalie, so that's why I'm divorcing you.
Dylan then brought the divorce papers from his room. I don't know how long he had been preparing the divorce papers, but the only thing which was blank was where I had to sign. Hey, why don't you reconsider this whole thing one more time? It's not something you can decide on the spur of the moment just because you're drunk, and Dylan, you're not being logical about any of this. And Julia, do you really think that father and mother would forgive you for taking away my husband? I couldn't care less about what father and mother would think about this. Because a wonderful man like Dylan wants me for who I am. So I don't need anything else. Hearing this, Dylan was also nodding right next to me. If anyone heard what they were both saying, it was clearly obvious that Dylan and Julia was both only after the money. Knowing that Dylan and Julia was in this situation, there would be no point in trying to persuade them any longer, no matter how much I tried. Besides, there was no way I would be able to persuade them when I've seen how they were like to each other. Dylan had always looked down on me, whether it was about earning money or just anything else in general, and having him requesting for divorce, I was actually beginning to feel a little better about the situation. Fine, we'll get a divorce, but it's too late to regret anything, okay? I signed the divorce papers as I said that, and the two of them rushed me to submit the papers to the city office immediately. They called a taxi for me and made me submit the divorce papers right away. After witnessing that I had submitted the divorce papers, both Julia and Dylan then officially got married a few weeks after that. The two were so well prepared for this. I also left the house, leaving Dylan and Julia, who seemed to be enjoying themselves in front of my eyes. And right after I left, they went to buy a room in that tower apartment on the same day. The total amount to buy a room in that tower apartment was about $2 million. When I first heard the amount, my mind went blank, and I really couldn't process that amount in my head.
Julia and I would move out next week, so I'll give this house back to you. Looking back on it now, it's such a small, shabby house.
Dylan described mercilessly about the house like that, even though it was where we had lived together since we got married. Dylan wanted to make himself look superior by looking down on someone else, no matter what. I see. Well then, I wish you both all the best. And that was the last time Dylan and I had talked with each other. On the day Dylan had moved out, he left without even saying goodbye. And since then, few days passed. The house was a little bigger now that they both left, but it was just the right size for living alone. I was finally free, being able to spread my wings comfortably for the first time in a long time. Then suddenly, the doorbell rang loudly. When I saw through the peephole, I saw Dylan right outside, and he looked really pale.
What the hell is wrong with that woman? Everything she told is a lie.
Dylan began to sit down by the front porch. Oh, so you must have finally realized by now who Julia really is, huh? While Dylan was sitting on the front porch, I explained who Julia really was through the door. Well, to begin with, Julia doesn't really even earn $5,000 per month. Actually, she doesn't even work full-time, and like me, she made her living by having a part-time job. Nevertheless, the reason she was able to wear such expensive clothes or have expensive branded goods was because Julia's boyfriends were paying everything for her. I knew that there were several men who'd do that for Julia, but I knew that once Julia got married, all of them would stop doing that. And plus, Julia knew how to spend a lot on things and could not be frugal and save any money at all. In terms of the money she received by her past boyfriends, she probably had a monthly income of about $10,000, but by the end of the month, since she would spend everything, she would have zero savings, which is why she would invite Dylan out for drinks for him to pay for her, so that she wouldn't have to pay for her own food expenses. And above all, she was in a lot of debt. She was also devoted to gambling, and from that, she was in debt. But she did lots of gambling so that she could just spend lavishly on shopping. The amount in which she had to repay for her debt was about $5,000 per month. In other words, Julia's debt was a lot more than the rent of the house where Dylan and I had lived. In the end, Dylan abandoned me and chose to be with Julia, who was in a lot of debt and had a habit of spending the money away. So, of course, there was no way that Dylan could afford to live such a rich life which he dreamed and planned for himself when he got together with Julia.
That woman! She's lied about everything to me. She's just scamming me, isn't she?
Well, you were also lying and pretending that you were earning $7,000 a month to Julia, weren't you? So you shouldn't be even saying that. You both did that to yourselves. The fact that the two of them were both just trying to make each other look good by lying about the truth was completely ridiculous. Dylan was talking as if he was the victim, but he had no right to talk that way since what he did was the same thing.
Well, why didn't you tell me about this in the first place? You were my wife.
Well, I'm not nice enough to give you any advice after you looked down on me like that. Because like what you and Julia said to me, it seems like I'm not really qualified to be a wife, right? After Dylan had heard what I had to say, he understood everything and began crying miserably at the door.
I'm so sorry, Natalie. I was completely wrong. I beg you, please just start over with me. If I continue to stay with that woman, I'll be ruined too.
It's too late to regret it now. I will never, ever get back together with you. So, can you please leave now? If you make any scene here, all the neighbors will see what you're doing and it'll be a rumor in no time, okay? Since you want other people to know that you're a good person, that's the last thing you want to be seen as, right? Dylan seemed to have been at the door for a while, but before I knew it, he left the house. He hates more than anything to be seen crying by the people he knows or he has met before. I felt just a little sorry for him, thinking that he would be a lot more miserable in the future. It seems like Dylan stayed at the tower apartment for only a few days and immediately sold the room. But since a large amount of debt remains for the tower apartment, he will have to pay it off bit by bit from now on. Julia and Dylan currently rented a new room and is living in it, but it is a small apartment for two people to live in, and they seem to be constantly fighting every day. Everything is coming all to Dylan with the fact that his divorce from me was due to his affair, and that he also had to pay alimony to me because of what he has done. The remaining debt for the tower apartment, and the rent, and the alimony. Naturally, it is not something Dylan, who really has a low monthly salary, can afford to pay, which is why he also began doing part-time jobs and other different jobs on the side, so that he could pay off what he had to pay. As for Julia, who is living with Dylan, she must have seen how frugal they both have to be, but it seems like she bought tons of clothes at a local clothing store the other day. It seems that her spending habits are still very much alive and probably very difficult to get rid of it. By seeing Julia being like that, it is hard to imagine when she will be able to pay off her debts. It looks like Julia tried to run away to our parents' house a few times, but Father disowned her because I had already reported this outrageous incident to him. Even I can no longer see Julia as my own elder sister. Compared to Dylan and Julia, my life has become a little easier, all thanks to Dylan's alimony. Plus, the manager of my part-time job asked me if I wanted to become a full-time employee. My manager said that they had just lost one of their full-time employee and wondered if I would be interested. I agreed to the offer right away. Thanks to this, I was able to earn enough money to live a comfortable life, even though I lived alone. So like this, in the end, I probably now earn more money than Dylan. Well, I guess I'll just treat myself to a nice little dinner tonight. Thinking that, I would return to my favorite house, while looking at the big tower apartment which is standing in the distance. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you in our next video.